In the ancient city of Alexandria, on the northern coast of Egypt, stood a place that many called the greatest treasure of the ancient world, not of gold or silver, but of wisdom. This was the Library of Alexandria, a vast sanctuary of learning that kings and scholars dreamed would one day contain all the knowledge of humankind. The story begins in the 3rd century BCE, when Alexander the Great founded the city of Alexandria. After his death, his generals divided his empire, and one of them, Ptolemy I Soter, took Egypt as his kingdom. Ptolemy understood something that many rulers overlooked. Power came not only from armies and wealth, but from knowledge. He envisioned Alexandria as a shining beacon of culture, a city that would surpass Athens as the intellectual capital of the world. To make this dream real, he and his successor, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, created the Great Library. The mission was bold and almost unbelievable: to collect every book, scroll, and text in existence. Ships that entered Alexandria's harbor were searched, and any written documents they carried were seized, copied by scribes, and added to the library's shelves. According to ancient writers, the library's collection grew to hundreds of thousands of scrolls, containing works of history, poetry, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and philosophy. Here, in cool, shaded halls lined with papyrus scrolls, scholars from across the Mediterranean gathered. Thinkers like Euclid, the father of geometry, and Eratosthenes, who calculated the Earth's circumference with astonishing accuracy, worked in Alexandria. Doctors studied medicine, astronomers charted the stars, poets translated Homer into new languages. The library was not just a building, it was humanity's collective memory, alive with debate, discovery, and imagination. To the people of the time, it must have felt as if nothing was impossible. What secrets of the universe might be unlocked in these scrolls? Some say the library held knowledge of steam engines, advanced medicine, even maps of lands far beyond the known world. Others believe this is myth, but one thing is certain: the Library of Alexandria was the closest the ancient world came to preserving all human wisdom in one place. But such a dream was fragile. Though kings could build walls, commission ships, and hire scholars, they could not guard against time, neglect, or the chaos of war. The library's fate would become one of the greatest mysteries in history, whispered in legends, debated by historians, and mourned by all who believe that knowledge is the truest form of treasure. For now, in its golden age, the Library of Alexandria stood as a monument to human curiosity. Yet the shadow of its loss already loomed on the horizon. What began as a dream of eternal wisdom would one day end in smoke, ashes, and silence. The Library of Alexandria was not a quiet storehouse of scrolls, but a living, breathing organism. It pulsed with voices, arguments, and ideas, echoing through the marble halls as some of the greatest minds of the ancient world gathered to teach, debate, and discover. The rulers of Egypt did not see themselves merely as kings. They wanted to be remembered as patrons of wisdom, guardians of knowledge itself. The library was closely linked to a great institution called the Mauson, or Temple of the Muses, where scholars lived, worked, and were supported by royal patronage. Imagine long stone corridors filled with astronomers, mathematicians, physicians, and poets. Each scholar had food, lodging, and a stipend from the king, allowing them to dedicate their lives to study. It was in many ways the world's first research university. Among the most famous of these scholars was Eratosthenes of Cyrene, a mathematician and geographer. With nothing more than shadows and geometry, he measured the Earth's circumference to within a tiny margin of error. Another was Herophilus, who dissected human bodies and laid the foundation of modern medicine, centuries before Europe would rediscover such knowledge. The poet Callimachus compiled the world's first catalogue of books, the Penox, organizing hundreds of thousands of scrolls so scholars could find the wisdom they sought. And then there was Archimedes, who corresponded with scholars in Alexandria while conducting his experiments in Syracuse. His inventions, from war machines to theories of buoyancy, were inspired and advanced by the exchange of ideas through the library's network. To think of Alexandria was to think of a hive of brilliance, where discoveries leapt from one mind to another like sparks from a fire. But the library's mission was not without controversy. The Ptolemies' aggressive collecting methods became notorious. Every ship that docked in Alexandria was inspected, its manuscripts seized. Originals were kept in the library, while copies were given back to the owners. Over decades, this practice transformed Alexandria into a vast ocean of knowledge, yet it also created resentment. Some accused the Ptolemies of hoarding learning, of keeping the wisdom of the world trapped in their scroll-lined chambers. Still, for the scholars who studied there, it must have felt like paradise. Imagine the scent of papyrus, the rows of wooden shelves stacked high, the oil lamps flickering at night as students debated philosophy or charted the heavens. There were whispers of manuscripts brought from India, Babylon, even lands beyond the Mediterranean. The library was not only a collection of Greek thought, it aspired to be universal. For generations, the library thrived under the protection of the Ptolemaic kings. Its reputation spread so widely that it became the symbol of Alexandria itself. Travelers came not only to see the city's lighthouse, the Pharos, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, but to glimpse the temple of wisdom where all human knowledge was said to reside. And yet, this brilliance came with fragility. The more the library grew, the more vulnerable it became. In a world of rival empires, political intrigues, and constant war, could a treasure so great remain safe forever? The scholars within its walls must have asked themselves this, perhaps in hushed voices as they copied texts and debated the stars. For every empire rises and falls, but could wisdom endure? The fate of the Library of Alexandria would soon test that question, and history's answer would be a tragedy still mourned to this day. For decades, the Library of Alexandria thrived under the careful protection of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Kings and queens poured resources into its halls, building Alexandria's reputation as the intellectual crown of the ancient world. But like every empire, Egypt's fortunes shifted, and with those changes came storms that threatened the sanctuary of wisdom. By the 2nd century BCE, the Ptolemies were no longer the invincible rulers they once were. Infighting among the royal family weakened their grip on power, while Rome's shadow loomed ever larger over the Mediterranean. Alexandria, once a beacon of stability, was drawn into political struggles and foreign wars. And with each conflict, the safety of the library grew more uncertain. The first whispers of danger came during the reign of Ptolemy VIII, a ruler whose cruelty and erratic behavior sparked rebellion within Egypt itself. Scholars who had once been cherished, now found themselves in peril. Many fled the city carrying knowledge with them. The library still stood, but cracks had begun to show. The greatest calamity came decades later, during the Roman conquest of Egypt. In 48 BCE, Julius Caesar pursued his rival Pompey into Alexandria. The city became a battleground as Caesar was besieged by Egyptian forces loyal to the ruling Ptolemy XIII. In desperation, Caesar ordered the burning of ships in the harbor to block his enemies. The flames leapt from vessel to vessel and soon spread into the city itself. Ancient writers tell us that the fire reached the warehouses and dockside buildings where copies of scrolls destined for the library were stored. Some accounts even suggest the flames touched the library itself, destroying part of its vast collection. Whether thousands or merely hundreds of scrolls perished is debated, but one truth remains. For the first time, the treasure of Alexandria had felt the kiss of destruction. The library was not yet gone. Later rulers, including Cleopatra, tried to restore it. But this first great fire became a symbol, a warning of how fragile the pursuit of knowledge truly was. Imagine the scholars who returned to blackened shelves, the papyrus reduced to ash, the words of ancient poets, mathematicians, and physicians vanishing forever in smoke. Even if the library survived partially intact, the damage was done. Rumors spread across the ancient world that irreplaceable works had been lost. Plays of Sophocles and Euripides unseen by later generations, histories of forgotten kingdoms, scientific treatises centuries ahead of their time. The idea of what had been destroyed became as powerful as the library itself. From this moment on, the Library of Alexandria was no longer invulnerable. Its reputation lived on, but now always shadowed by tragedy. For some, the fire of Caesar was the end. For others, it was only the beginning of a slow decline. Over the next centuries, the library would face neglect, further conflicts, and perhaps more flames. Still, in the aftermath of disaster, Alexandria did not give up its role as a center of knowledge. Scholars remained, scrolls were recopied, and learning continued. Yet a question lingered in the air like smoke. How many sparks of human genius had been lost forever in that single blaze? And if wisdom could be so easily destroyed, what hope did the world have of preserving the truth of its past? After the chaos of Julius Caesar's fire, Alexandria rose again. The city's resilience was legendary, and with it, the library clung to life. The exact scale of the destruction remained debated even among the ancients. Some said only storehouses had burned, others insisted great portions of the main library had perished. What is certain is that the dream of universal knowledge lived on, nurtured by the last and most famous of the Ptolemies, Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra was no mere queen of beauty and romance, as Roman propaganda later painted her. She was a linguist, a strategist, and above all, a patron of knowledge. Fluent in many tongues, including Egyptian, which her Greek forebears had ignored, she sought to revive Alexandria's intellectual prestige. For Cleopatra, knowledge was power, and the library, though wounded, remained a jewel in her kingdom. When Caesar lingered in Alexandria after his conquest, Cleopatra seized the moment. Their union was not simply passion but politics. She offered him Egypt's riches, including its treasure of knowledge. Some accounts even suggest that when scrolls were lost to fire, Cleopatra gifted Caesar with 200,000 manuscripts from the Library of Pergamon as replacements. Whether myth or truth, it shows the library's continuing importance to her reign. Under Cleopatra, scholars were encouraged once more, and the Mausoleum resumed its role as a sanctuary of learning. Astronomy, medicine, and philosophy still thrived in its halls. Imagine the queen herself walking among the scholars, her golden diadem glinting in the lamplight as she listened to debates about the cosmos or the nature of the soul. She knew that Alexandria's power was not just in its fleets or wealth, but in its ability to be the beating heart of human thought. Yet the world around her was changing. Rome's grip tightened with every year, and Cleopatra's alliances became matters of survival. First with Caesar, then with Mark Antony, she sought to shield Egypt from annexation. But her fate, and that of the library, would be decided at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE. When Antony and Cleopatra were defeated by Octavian, the future Augustus, the dream of an independent Egypt collapsed. Alexandria was taken by Rome, and with it, the library passed into foreign hands. Some traditions claim that Octavian, in his triumph, allowed the remnants of the library to be plundered or neglected. Others argue it remained intact, though diminished, now serving Roman governors rather than Egyptian kings. What is certain is that after Cleopatra's death, the library was never again spoken of with the same awe. Its golden age had passed. The spark of brilliance that had once defined Alexandria now flickered uncertainly, threatened by neglect as much as by flames. Still, echoes of its influence lingered. Roman writers marveled at the knowledge that had come from Alexandria, from Eratosthenes' geometry to Herophilus' medicine. The city remained a center of learning, though increasingly overshadowed by Rome itself. The library, wounded but not entirely destroyed, became a ghost of its former self, its glory living more in legend than in reality. And yet, the tragedy of Cleopatra's fall was more than political. It was the end of an era where rulers saw themselves as custodians of wisdom. With her death, the torch of knowledge was no longer guarded by a queen who understood its value as power. The library endured, but its fate was now bound to empires far less devoted to the muses. The whispers of scholars must have grown quieter in those marble halls. The scrolls still stood on their shelves, but the vision that had created the library, of a place where all the knowledge of the world could be gathered, was dimming. And with time, the silence would grow louder, until only memories remained. With Cleopatra gone and Egypt absorbed into the Roman Empire, Alexandria entered a new chapter. One where the city's brilliance still shone, but the library itself became increasingly vulnerable. Rome admired Greek and Egyptian knowledge, yet it did not share the same passion for preserving it in one sacred place. For the emperors, libraries were symbols of prestige, not sanctuaries of truth. Under Augustus, Alexandria retained its importance as a great city of the Mediterranean. Scholars still gathered, and Roman officials valued its intellectual wealth. Yet the library no longer stood at the heart of a kingdom dedicated to knowledge. Instead, it became a tool of empire. Copies of manuscripts were taken to Rome, enriching the new capital. Some scrolls remained in Alexandria, but the vision of collecting all the world's knowledge had faded. The Roman world built its own libraries, magnificent, yes, but scattered. The unified dream of Alexandria was dissolving. And worse still, time itself worked against the fragile papyrus scrolls. Without constant care, they crumbled into dust. Neglect, in some ways, proved more destructive than fire. But the library's decline was not sudden. It flickered for centuries, enduring wars, regime changes, and ideological shifts. By the 2nd century CE, Alexandria remained a hub of learning, especially in medicine and philosophy. The Serapeum, a grand temple dedicated to the god Serapis, was said to house part of the library's collection, perhaps a daughter library where scrolls were stored and studied. Roman travelers marveled at the city's culture, its scholars, its deep traditions. Yet the whispers of its once universal library were already growing faint. The next blow came not from neglect, but from a changing world. As Christianity rose across the Roman Empire, old institutions tied to pagan gods and Greek philosophy were increasingly seen with suspicion. The Serapeum, where knowledge and religion intertwined, became a symbol of resistance to the new faith. In 391 CE, during the reign of Emperor Theodosius, Christian mobs, supported by imperial decree, destroyed the Serapeum in a violent clash. Statues were shattered, temples burned, and with them perhaps another trove of scrolls vanished. Did this mark the end of the Library of Alexandria? Some historians argue that by then the true library had already ceased to exist, its treasures scattered or lost centuries earlier. Others believe this moment destroyed the last remnant of its collection. Either way, the event became another chapter in the library's tragic legend, not just a victim of fire but of faith, politics, and shifting tides of power. Still, even in decline, Alexandria shaped the Roman world. Its physicians influenced Roman medicine, its mathematicians contributed to astronomy, its philosophers shaped theology and ethics. Fragments of the library's legacy survived through those who carried its wisdom far beyond Egypt's shores. Knowledge could be burned, yes, but not entirely silenced. And so, as Rome itself began to falter in the centuries to come, the story of Alexandria stood as a haunting reminder. What was lost in those flames, in those riots, in that slow decay? How much of humanity's genius had vanished forever? The Romans had built an empire of stone, roads, and armies, but in Alexandria they held something more fragile, the soul of human thought. And like sand slipping through fingers, it could not be held forever. By the dawn of the 7th century CE, the Roman Empire in the east, the Byzantine Empire, controlled Egypt. Alexandria was still a jewel of the Mediterranean, but it was no longer the city of kings, scholars, and poets it had once been. Its great monuments aged, its population shifted, and though learning persisted, the legendary library had become a shadow of memory. Some said remnants of it still existed, perhaps in private collections or hidden within temples. Others whispered that it had long ago been reduced to ash. Then came a new turning point in history, the rise of Islam. In 642 CE, only a decade after the Prophet Muhammad's passing, Arab forces swept through North Africa under the command of Amr ibn al-As, seizing Egypt from Byzantine rule. The conquest was swift, and Alexandria once again found itself at the crossroads of empires. It is here that one of the most famous, and most debated, stories about the Library of Alexandria emerges. According to later accounts, when Amr ibn al-As took the city, he consulted the Caliph Umar about what to do with the vast collection of books supposedly still held in Alexandria. Umar is said to have replied, "If these books agree with the Quran, they are unnecessary. If they disagree, they are heresy. Destroy them." The tale claims that the scrolls were distributed among the city's bathhouses, used as fuel to heat the waters for 6 months until the collection was gone. Imagine the horror. Centuries of human genius reduced to kindling for steam. Works of Plato, Aristarchus, Galen, and countless unknown minds, all consumed in fire not of war but of utility. Yet historians debate whether this event truly happened. The story appears in sources written centuries after the conquest, and earlier Muslim chroniclers never mention it. Many scholars today argue that by the time the Arabs arrived, the great library no longer existed in any recognizable form. What remained were fragments scattered across the city, already neglected or lost to time. Still, legend has power. For many, the Arab conquest became the final act in the tragedy of Alexandria, the last nail in the coffin of human memory. Whether true or not, the image of scrolls fueling bathhouse fires has endured for over 1,000 years, a symbol of how fragile civilization's wisdom can be. And yet, the arrival of Islam did not erase knowledge. Far from it. The new rulers of Egypt, particularly during the Abbasid Caliphate, would go on to sponsor a golden age of learning. Scholars in Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo translated Greek works into Arabic, preserving much of what might have otherwise been lost. Ironically, had the Library of Alexandria truly perished centuries before, it was Islamic civilization that would carry the torch of ancient wisdom into the medieval world. But still, what if? What if some scrolls had survived until the Arab conquest? What if works we cannot even imagine were burned away, their ashes drifting over the city? The mystery lingers, a wound in the fabric of history. In that uncertainty lies the enduring power of the Library of Alexandria. Its end is not one single moment but many, a fire, a riot, a neglectful age, a conquest. Each generation has told its own version of how it died. But perhaps the truth is that the library never died in one night, nor in one fire. It withered piece by piece over centuries. And yet, like a ghost, it refuses to fade entirely. Though the flames and ruins of Alexandria seem to close a chapter, its spirit lived on in ways the ancient scholars could scarcely have imagined. The knowledge that once filled its scrolls did not vanish entirely. fragments survived, copied, translated, and carried far beyond the city that first sought to gather the world's wisdom. With the rise of the Islamic Golden Age between the 8th and 13th centuries, centers of learning blossomed across the Middle East and North Africa. Cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo became the new guardians of knowledge. The Abbasid caliphs, in particular, built institutions that mirrored Alexandria's dream. Chief among them was the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, where scholars translated works of Greek, Persian, and Indian thought into Arabic. Here, the legacy of Alexandria found new life. The medical texts of Hippocrates and Galen, the geometry of Euclid, the astronomy of Ptolemy, and the philosophy of Aristotle, all were preserved and expanded upon. Muslim scholars did not merely safeguard ancient wisdom, they advanced it. Figures like Al-Khwarizmi, the father of algebra, Ibn Sina, Avicenna, in medicine, and Al-Hazan, Ibn al-Haytham, in optics, built upon foundations that Alexandria had once preserved. It was as though the ashes of the library had been scattered across the Islamic world, taking root in new soil. The dream of universal knowledge had shifted eastward, carried by those who valued not only preservation but innovation. And through trade, travel, and translation, this knowledge began to flow westward once more. By the 12th century, Europe too began to reawaken. The Crusades, though destructive, opened channels of cultural exchange. In Spain, Sicily, and the Levant, scholars encountered Arabic texts, themselves translations of Greek originals once housed in Alexandria. Monks, scribes, and translators worked tirelessly to render these works into Latin. It was through this chain of preservation and transmission that Europe rediscovered Aristotle, Galen, Euclid, and more. Without Alexandria's dream, reborn through the Islamic Golden Age, the European Renaissance might never have come. The works that fueled the minds of thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci, Galileo, and Copernicus were, in part, descendants of scrolls that had once lain in the great halls of the Library of Alexandria. And yet, even as knowledge spread anew, the legend of the lost library grew larger than life. Writers and philosophers in the medieval and Renaissance periods spoke of it with awe and sorrow. They imagined halls of infinite wisdom, secrets of the cosmos, cures for disease, maps of lands unknown, all gone. The library became less a physical place and more a symbol, a reminder of what humanity could achieve, and of how fragile such achievements truly are. In this way, Alexandria's story shaped the very way people thought about knowledge. To lose a library was to lose a part of civilization itself. And so, scholars of the Islamic Golden Age, monks of medieval Europe, and visionaries of the Renaissance all carried forward not only fragments of Alexandria's scrolls, but also its enduring lesson, that knowledge must be preserved, guarded, and shared, lest it slip into oblivion. The dream was alive, flickering across centuries. But Alexandria's shadow loomed still. For even as humanity advanced, people could not help but wonder, what had been lost that no golden age could restore? Though centuries have passed since the last scroll of the Library of Alexandria was said to vanish, its legend refuses to fade. In fact, it has grown larger with every generation, transforming from a story of loss into a symbol of humanity's endless quest for knowledge. By the modern era, Alexandria was no longer the shining beacon of the ancient world. The city had changed hands countless times, Byzantine, Arab, Ottoman, French, British, and yet, beneath the layers of history, its memory still pulsed. Travelers, scholars, and dreamers came to its shores not only for trade or conquest, but in search of echoes of the greatest library that ever was. Archaeologists have long debated whether the ruins of the library still lie hidden beneath Alexandria's streets or buried under the waves of its harbor. Some fragments have been discovered, papyri preserved in the sands of Egypt, inscriptions that hint at catalogs, and the writings of ancient authors who once walked its halls. But no grand chamber of scrolls has ever been unearthed. The library's remains, if they exist, may have been swallowed forever by time. And yet, the idea of the Library of Alexandria has proven stronger than stone. In the year 2002, after decades of planning, Egypt opened the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, a modern library built near the site of the ancient wonder. Its mission was bold: to revive the spirit of the original library, to create a space where the world's knowledge could once again be gathered and shared. With millions of books, digital archives, and international partnerships, it became a living tribute to humanity's oldest dream, that wisdom belongs not to one age or people but to all. Today, when we speak of the Library of Alexandria, we are not only mourning what was lost. We are imagining what could have been. What cures, what discoveries, what philosophies were consumed by fire or scattered to the winds. What secrets of the universe slipped through our fingers, never to return. These questions haunt us, and they inspire us. For the legend of Alexandria reminds us of both the fragility and resilience of knowledge. Fragility because books can burn, scrolls can rot, and institutions can fall. Resilience because ideas, once spoken, have a way of surviving, passed on through memory, translation, and reinvention. The library may have fallen, but its spirit helped shape the Islamic Golden Age, the Renaissance, and even the scientific revolution. In a way, the Library of Alexandria never truly died. It simply transformed. It exists in every university, every digital archive, every effort to preserve human creativity against the forces of time. And perhaps, in our modern world of technology, where billions of pages, voices, and images are preserved in an instant, we have come closer than ever to realizing Alexandria's original dream. Yet the library's story carries a warning too, that knowledge, though powerful, is never safe from neglect, destruction, or indifference. It must be cherished, guarded, and shared. For what is knowledge if not a flame, one that can light the world, but also one that can be extinguished if left untended? So the tale of the Library of Alexandria ends not in its ashes, but in us. In every book we write, every discovery we protect, and every effort we make to preserve the wisdom of the past for the future. The dream lives on, eternal, unbroken. The library is gone, but its spirit whispers still, seek knowledge. Guard it. Share it. For it is the greatest treasure of all.